after God created Adam and Eve, God blessed them, saying, "Have children. Have lots and lots of them. Fill the whole earth with your children." But since Adam and Eve had turned away from God's good way and followed the way of sin, all their children were born into a life of sin as well, separated from God. But the good news is that God, who loved us and is so good and so merciful, made a promise to Adam and Eve that one day their descendants would come and rescue the whole world from sin and bring us back to God. Do you know what the word descendants mean? Yeah, it's a person who is related to you and who lives after you, such as your child or grandchild or great-grandchild. So when God promised that one of Adam's descendants would be the Savior, it could be one of their children or one of their grandchildren or one of their great-grandchildren, or maybe many, many, many years later with the great-great-great-great-grandchild. They did not know who it would be. So in the past, every time a baby was born, God's people wondered, could this baby be the one who will rescue the whole world? Could this baby be the one who could rescue the whole world? Could this baby be the one that would rescue the whole world? Could this baby be the one that would rescue the whole world? Adam and Eve were excited when their first two children were born. They wondered if one of them would be the Savior. Abel was definitely not the one, and Cain was definitely not the one. And their third son, Seth, seemed just like everyone else. But the Bible tells us that God had chosen Seth's family line to be the one to bring us the Savior. So now, Seth had a son who 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 had a son named Noah. And we heard all about Noah last week, didn't we? Noah was a man of God. He was a good man, and he pleased God. And God made a promise to Noah. God promised that he would rescue him from the waters of the flood that came to destroy the sinful world. Noah had faith in God's promise. So Noah obeyed and did everything that God had commanded. And after a great, great flood, God spoke to Noah and said that he would never flood the earth again. And he told Noah to go have children, have lots of them, fill the earth with your children. And that's just what they did. Noah's children, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, were on the ark with Noah, and they all had children. but it was Shem's line who were in the line of promise. Today's story is one of the descendants of Shem. This is the line of promise. And this was a man named Abraham. And he lived in a place called Ur with his wife, Sarah. When God chose Abraham of all the people in the world to bless. Why? Was he a godly man like Noah? No, not at all. Abraham did not know anything about God. He had been born into this world of sin, and he worshipped idols and not the true God. Now, there were a few other problems with Abraham and his wife. First of all, they were very, 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 very old. And secondly, they were never able to have children. Now, I bet you're saying to yourself, wait a second, how could this old man who didn't know God and had no descendants, no children at all, be the one to bring us the Savior? It seemed impossible. But God wanted to show the world that nothing was too hard for him. After all, he created the whole world from nothing, and he could make a family, a people for himself out of nothing. So, from all the people on the earth, God chose Abraham and Sarah to bless. And God spoke to Abraham and said, "Go, leave your country and follow me to the place I will lead you, and I will bless you greatly." Abraham considered the promise, and he considered the one who made the promise. "Yes," he said to himself, "I will go. I have faith in God and his promise." And so Abraham obeyed God and did everything God had commanded. He and his wife Sarah left Ur, and they turned away from their old ways and began to walk in God's ways. Over time, God explained more and more about how he was going to bless Abraham, and over time, Abraham's faith grew. God promised that one day he would have a child, and that eventually he would have as many children as there were stars in the sky. And God promised to give those children special land for their very own, and to give them a king and make a great nation that would bless all other nations. And best of all, God promised that he would be Abraham's God and that the God of his descendants forever. Blessing upon blessing upon blessing. God is so good. Now, everyone had to wait a long time to see all these promises come true. But you know what? God did keep his promise. God began by giving Abraham a son named Isaac. And even though it seemed impossible, God had done it. When Abraham died, all the promises that God made were passed to his son, Isaac. And Isaac had twin boys. The older boy was named Esau, and the younger one was named Jacob. And Jacob was greatly blessed. Just as he had promised, Jacob, who God renamed later Israel, had 12 sons. Now there were lots and lots of stories of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and his sons in the Bible. We don't have time to tell you all of them today, but I need you to know that one day there was a famine in the land of Canaan, and all of Jacob's family moved to Egypt, where they were blessed by God. And they were blessed by God and grew in numbers until there were not 100 or 1,000 of them, but more like millions and trillions. There were so many of them that they filled the land of Egypt, and from that time on they were called the Israelites, God's chosen people, chosen to bring a blessing to the whole world. And years and years and years later, from the Israelites, there came one perfect man named Jesus, and he was the Savior, and in him all of God's promises came true. Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good. His love endures forever.